Hi, everybody. This is Charles Hoskinson broadcasting live from warm, sunny Colorado. It is currently April 3rd, and I wanted to make a video to give some updates, talk about things, talk about Corona. Why not? I mean, we're all under quarantine. What else do we have to do? Talk about my cool router in the back. So today was a pretty interesting day. I had a great time, a great experience with McCann. The marketing of Cardano, the PR of Cardano, the visuals behind Cardano, this is a really big endeavor. And there are a lot of different entities that are involved on the commercialization and the presentation and the explanation. So I figured it'd be good to kind of open up the curtain a little bit and talk about how we do things and where we're going and how involved this actually is. So every company, Emergo, Cardano Foundation, and IOHK, we all have our own marketing divisions. And usually that involves not just one, but a collection of people who are cross-disciplinary. So we have media relations specialists, communication specialists, product marketers, and then people who are actually directly responsible for campaign marketing. And then we also have community managers who help build virality and surrogacy with messaging. Then there are actually 3 external firms that we're actively working with, either talking about commercialization or talking about marketing itself. The commercialization side has been really spearheaded and unified by PwC. We had a workshop right before the quarantine started, so knock on wood, we're very lucky that we managed to get in and out without most of an issue. And that was in London. And really what that allowed us to do is spend 3 days with Cardano Foundation, Emergo, and IOHK together, a big chunk of people, well over 50 people at the PwC offices in London. And working alongside them, we were able to have a broad discussion about delivery, execution, marketing, commercialization, prioritizations, roles and responsibilities, intercorporate communication. It was an extremely intensive 3 days. They were 12, 15-hour days. Enormous amounts of information was collected. Hundreds of action items were produced. We had to create an entire committee and team within our organization just to address our collection of things that we need to do. And we've been processing that. Now, some of that workshop was about vision and mission, better ways of discussing and describing Cardano, better ways of discussing and describing Cardano to Fortune 500 companies, et cetera, et cetera. Then IOHK also works with an organization known as April 6. They're a PR specialist organization, and they're very, very good at sentiment analysis. They're very, very good at getting strong relationships with good journalists, independent or attached, and being able to create great narratives and assist us with a lot of different things that we need to get done, whether that be getting some positive press in certain jurisdictions, campaigns within certain jurisdictions to just more accurate and fair descriptions of our products. But they also can assist with marketing, and they also do sentiment analysis, which is basically the public reception of the things we do. Now, we also mentioned that we're working with McCann, and we've actually been working with McCann since, I think, December, and this has been a hot-cold relationship. In the beginning, they did some work, and I wasn't terribly impressed with that work, and I was very critical and vocal, mostly because I felt the team was very talented. We've been working with them for something else that we haven't announced yet, and that workload was quite well done. And so I said, come on, guys, you're better than this. This is not great work. So today they did a presentation, and it was considerably better than the first presentation. They really took to heart. They got very specific. They did everything from brand to colors to some ideas about campaigns. And I was very, very happy with that output. And it gave us a lot of hooks that we can connect to as 3 entities and all the people working together, so that when we launch Shelly, at the same time as launching Shelly, we can actually launch the rebrand of Cardano. The most significant asset in that relaunch will be the Cardano.org website. I liken it at the moment to like Pompeii. You know, if you ever go there, you can see all the ash bodies and city that's been frozen in time. Similarly, Cardano.org has not been updated in a very long time in a meaningful way. And what's happening under the hood is a big team of people are working across all 3 organizations with our external vendors to completely rebuild that website as the entry point into the Cardano ecosystem. That regardless if you're on the investor side, the developer side, the governance side, or you are on the operations side, the stake pool side, there'll be a place for you to hook into, and lots of rich content, both static and dynamic, and interactive in some cases, that'll allow people to basically come on in. So we're quite happy to see that McCann has finally produced something that we can use and work with, and actually I think it's going to provide a lot of value to the ecosystem. I know you guys have been asking about McCann for quite some time, and I keep saying, well, let me see what they have, let me see what they have, and they finally did something that's quite significant. And I think with what they have, we can work with that, move forward, and ultimately it's going to be a very productive and positive relationship. And you often find this with contractors or external firms. There's a spooling time for them to get familiar, passionate, and really get a chip on their shoulder and feel like they have to actually deliver something great. And you have to kind of break through the ice, and sometimes that requires sharp elbows, but we got there. And I'm very proud and happy that we finally did. So this brand refresh will probably take another 6 to 8 weeks of work, and it'll probably also involve some other activities that we're pushing forward. And then there's a lot of product marketing work that we have to do. We really have to do a good job explaining Ouroboros. We really have to do a good job explaining the extended UTXO model and Plutus and Marlowe, and a DSL-driven approach for smart contracts. Our multi-asset system is very different from the ERC20 system. So we're going to have to do a lot of work to explain that. There are certain concepts like how we handle voting and governance, which people don't quite know about yet, and we haven't really been public with them yet, but those are coming soon, so we really do need to start talking about them. And other little artifacts like how Adrestia works, the libraries that we're going to be rolling out this month, if you're going to use it for integration, these things. So it's a Herculean effort, and also Cardano Docs is being completely rewritten, and that's also in that 6 to 8 week time horizon. And we'll be releasing a lot of assets. So marketing is definitely underway, and there's at least 5 entities, independent entities, working full time with non-trivial amounts of money and people at getting things back to a point where we can feel comfortable with a very aggressive campaign and really push out why we're special, why we're unique, and why Cardano is an amazing platform to utilize, regardless of the particular personas or behaviors that you're indulging in. For the McCann question, I just wanted to address that and say, good work, guys, and more to do. About the Byron reboot, to pivot to that, we released Flight. We've received 27 support tickets so far in Flight. We're going to cut another release for Flight on Monday. We found a memory leak and a few little things here and there. But overall, we're very happy with what we've seen, and overall, we're very happy with the response and the dialogue that we've had as a result of Flight. Shortly thereafter, this next cut of Flight, if things look pretty good, then we'll push that to the classic Daedalus and get that out, and then we'll keep the rollout plan for Byron Reboot. It looks like most of the reboot should be percolated throughout Cardano by mid-April. In addition to that, we've gotten a lot of questions about the audit report that Root 9B did, and we're in remediation mode right now for their findings. I think currently our schedule is all remediation should be finished and signed off by April 17th. Now, if that occurs and Root 9B is comfortable with the remediation and authorizes a release, then we'll publicly release the audit report. We've done this before with Kadelsky as a prior auditor, so I don't really anticipate there's going to be an issue there. But it looks like we're going to have a clean bill of health after we finish all the remediation. It's a very worthwhile audit. It was a lot of fun working with the Root 9B crew, and we'll probably engage them for a more deep and aggressive audit on certain parts of the system, and a more dynamic audit than just a static analysis, because there are certain things that I personally would feel really good if we took a closer look at in general, because they've never been looked at by people in the cryptocurrency space. There's a lot of cryptography used within Cardano, from a key evolving signature to verified random functions to a new type of signature scheme. We made modifications, for example, to ED25519 for the HT wallet support. So there's little things like that are specific to Cardano, and they're not used elsewhere in the space, or they're not reused by a lot of projects in the space. So in general, you need to spend quite a bit of time auditing that stuff. But Route 9B has done a phenomenal job actually doing a first pass. We have an internal audit group at IOHK. They mostly come out of Rensselaer Polytech Institute, and they work with Vasilis Zikas. I think they're called Bcryptic, and they've been with us actually for 2 years. And they tend to take a look at our designs or specifications and specific issues. We also have several cryptographic engineers who work at IOHK who specialize in the implementation of cryptographic algorithms. So we're uniquely suited as an implementation firm to deal with this type of code and write this code safely. So generally, these audits are more formalities than they are things that find significant issues. Although every now and then there's something that surprises us, and this is why we do it. And we think it's a final watermark. But look for that as well. So the Byron reboot is right now being digested, and on the tail end of that, the remediation for some of the Shelley stuff will also be done, and we'll release the audit report in April. Next week is a pretty heavy week for us, where we're now having a deep and detailed discussion about the Shelley Haskell testnet and the best way of pulling those pieces together and starting that rollout. So I don't quite have news for you yet on dates, but throughout this month, as things mature and materialize, now that we're on a regular release cadence, literally every week software is being released. Node is every 2 weeks. Daedalus Flight is at least every 2 weeks. The Node Wallet backend is every week. A lot of stuff is coming, and those things are not Byron stuff. Those are directly Shelley components. And so just a matter of stitching things together, and just a matter of deciding how we want to handle that rollout. So we're still debating what the best options are on this rollout. But the good news is that we kind of learned a lot from the ITN. We found 269 areas for improvement from our postmortem of the ITN. We also learned an enormous amount about from our community about suggestions for ways to improve the stake pool experience, the user interface, specific APIs that they wanted, libraries that they wanted. We also talked with some firms. For example, we talked with Bison Trails about staking as a service because certain exchanges use them, and we're starting conversations about how we can integrate so that when Shelley is turned on, if you have your ADA in an exchange that supports this and they're a client, you'll be able to delegate through them as a staking service. So there's a lot of these conversations going on. We also signed an agreement through the Cardano Foundation for Ledger to support both multi-sig on Ledger as well as cold staking on the Ledger device. So a lot of these little things are kind of being done in parallel, in addition to the libraries we're creating, in addition to a lot of the digestion of the Byron reboot. But overall, we're very happy with what we see, and not only that, the fact that the release cadences are still consistent, and what we thought was going to happen is actually happening in practice. So marketing is underway. Byron is being digested. A lot of Shelley-related stuff is happening under the hood this month, and hopefully we should have some good news for you guys pretty soon, within the next few weeks, about what's happening. And of course, we'll keep our monthly product update cadence. We had great attendance. I think almost 1,000 people attended live for the Crowdcast. And we're right now, next week, kind of narrowing down to a final selection of vendors for the virtual conference we're going to have for the launch of Shelley. And hopefully we should be able to do some advertising quickly for that, because we'd like to get as many people as possible to attend. Now, there is a conference we are attending that's virtual, and so it's my first virtual conference, well, second virtual conference. I did one a few years ago, but this is the ZK Proof Summit that's going to be happening April 20th in a few weeks, every, I think, Monday, Thursday, or something like that. So we're presenting there. And if you're curious about the research we've been doing for the past few years on zero-knowledge cryptography, we actually created our own SNARK and implemented our own SNARK, and we're starting to do some really cutting-edge research in private computation. It's kind of a next-generation style thing. And so the authors of that paper, Kachina and Sonic, the privacy computation theme and the SNARK, respectively, will be presenting at that conference. And they've been working with us for years, and they've done some phenomenal work. We're very happy with it. And we think this is going to help advance the state of the art in zero knowledge cryptography. So let's see here. Okay, COVID. I mentioned that in the title as well. So where are we at with COVID? You know, where's the world at? One of my employees has tested positive for COVID, but that employee is not in a development role, and it is definitely starting to pick up in the United States. If you see the death toll in Spain, Italy, it's usually 500 to 1,000 people a day. In the United States, I think New York with over 400 or something like that today, and those numbers are going to continue to mount. And unfortunately, over the next 2-3 weeks, it's basically going to be like a September 11th a day in terms of mortality, if you add up the entire U.S. And that's going to happen for at least the next 4 weeks to 6 weeks. The good news is that there are over 100 clinical trials on market at the moment, and there's very good evidence that those trials will produce some form of treatment that's quite reasonable by the end of April. And this is everything from remdesivir to clinical trials of hydroxychloroquine to other drugs on market. Some are immunosuppressants, some are antiviral drugs, some are supportive therapies. Regardless, the whole world has awoken. And should we find good therapeutics, and now that we have a test from Roche that can tell if you have coronavirus within 20 to 30 minutes, and an antibody test that's 98% accurate, that also can tell you if you've had coronavirus within an hour, by the end of this month, I think there's a very strong possibility that we can start tampering down quarantines in developed nations that have taken the time to scale up, in particular the United States. Remains to be seen where Europe will be at, but the goal probably will end up being trying to get the mortality rate of COVID to be on par with influenza. So while people will die and people will get infected, it seems that governments probably can tolerate an influenza rate of mortality for CFR. If we have good therapeutics, good tracking and tracing, we still follow social distancing, people wear masks. They don't even have to wear N95 masks, just wearing masks themselves prevents the sick from spreading it to others. It's a great way of collecting these things. It doesn't prevent you from getting sick, but if you are sick, it can help you prevent you from spreading it to others, especially if you're an asymptomatic carrier. I think perhaps May will be a better month, but there's no lying about it. April's going to be very tough for everybody. We at IOHK are fine financially, and we're fine operationally. We're not experiencing any disruptions. We're not experiencing any slowdowns. Overall, our company is actually operating faster than we've ever operated before because engineers aren't really capable of going and playing. So all they can really do is just write code at the moment. So the dark reality is that this has not yet disrupted us, but it certainly has disrupted the world. And it's really had a profound impact. Some friends of mine have contracted coronavirus. Some friends have died. And I've heard through the extended channels of other people who've lost family members from it. And that is only going to continue, and likely at least 1 million people worldwide are probably going to die, if not more. So this is definitely a tragedy, and it's a very sad tragedy. And it's one that is going to probably change a lot of things. Now, there's a lot of questions about civil liberties, and this is one of the reasons why I'm bringing up COVID. You see, you can't just have a situation where trillions of dollars are spent and millions of people potentially die, and the world just says, well, that was tragic, and moves on and goes back to normal. The reality is that we're probably going to have a situation where there's a dramatic attempt to increase government authority. And there are also going to be probably some hardening of free travel and borders. And there's been a lot of discussion about global identity, vaccine and medical passports, testing at borders, these types of things to prevent another pandemic from forming. And also to perhaps push a globalist agenda to make the world a little bit more manageable. And we have to be very careful as a global community to resist unnecessary things. It's important to have perspective. Pandemics happen. They're horrible tragedies, and it's terrible when this many people die. But not too long ago, my grandparents and great grandparents lived in a world that still had polio, smallpox, measles, mumps, rubella, lived in a world where millions of people died from tuberculosis. And it's great that we've been able to get rid of these things, but we as a human species have somehow been able to operate despite the fact that we have suffered from horrible diseases in the past. And we have not had to trade our privacy, our liberty, and our freedom to deal with these pandemics. So it would be utterly unreasonable for agendas to be pushed on society that would force us to surrender our privacy, our autonomy, our medical transparency, these types of things for the sake of preventing the world's next pandemic. This is a time of great innovation. University of Pittsburgh, for example, recently came out with a microneedle vaccine design. The needles are made of sugar. It doesn't need to be refrigerated. It can be mass manufactured cheaply, and it's a very effective way of distributing a vaccine. And I don't even believe they contain mercury. And so it's a great example of innovation that's occurring. And the fact that Roche was able to come up with a coronavirus test that normally take a year to get approval in 2 weeks, that can tell you in 30 minutes if you have it with a high degree of accuracy, tells you that we can certainly accomplish a lot when our backs are against the wall. But that is not an excuse for a massive expansion of government power, and that is not an excuse for a massive expansion of government surveillance. This is not necessary. We don't need to track every human being in the world and have some central authority know we all are, just so that we can socially isolate people. It's not worth it. It really isn't. And it brings to the point of why cryptocurrencies and blockchain technology are so important, because ultimately you can't just criticize an approach and then say, "Hey guys, we have no other option." You have to be able to say, "Yes, your approach is wrong, but instead of just saying it's wrong, here's a different way of doing things." So we at IOHK are building a digital identity system. We at IOHK are building systems for voting. We at IOHK are building systems to track and trace supply chains. All of these things are interconnected to the current crises we have. When the US federal government started asking states how many ventilators they needed, the first question they would ask is, well, how many ventilators do you have? And some of our states actually didn't have inventory. They had never bothered to count, or it didn't actually have the processes or capabilities to take proper inventory of personal protective equipment and ventilators and medical supplies like drugs, which is an extraordinary statement. The most expensive healthcare system in the world and the wealthiest country in the world is incapable of even knowing how many ventilators are in a particular state. So we need better ways of managing supply chains and negotiating and bartering things. For example, right now we're having a problem where states are bidding against each other and the free market and the federal government for personal protective equipment. So if you had larger marketplaces which were intrinsically global and universal, then you could put special logic if the actors agreed to ensure that those marketplaces behave in ways that are fair for everybody. So I think the technology that we're building definitely can have a very meaningful and significant impact, and especially the privacy technology, because I do get that there is some social value in times of crisis and emergency, tracking and tracing people who potentially could be carriers of a disease or exposed. But there are ways to potentially do that and alert people that they may be a carrier without even actually compromising their privacy. And this work we do with zero knowledge snarks, and these zero knowledge proof and the privacy technology we're developing could potentially add a lot of value in that conversation. So after Corona starts fading back, and when we have therapeutics, it will start fading back. You will not see the government fade back. Most governments are going to start encroaching. They're going to start getting a bit more aggressive. Emergency powers will not be given back as quickly as they need to be. And there is also going to be a tremendous financial fallout from all of this. The US government printed $6 trillion out of thin air. They're probably going to print a few trillion more. they're on a land grab right now because money's cheap. And while our government may get away with that in the short term, other governments are not going to be so lucky. And when Italy or others try to start printing money and where and when they can, or issuing debt where and when they can, through any means they can, whether it be through the European Union or another entity, they'll find that the appetite for that debt and the appetite for that debasement is not as significant as ours. And so then what ends up happening is that it'll actually create hyperinflation, or it'll actually create a bad recession for the economy, which it's already in. So we're going to see a lot of social change, a lot of political change, a lot of governmental change. We've already seen, for example, the government of Hungary embrace emergency totalitarianism in a very unethical way. And unfortunately, it looks like China is also going to have a very difficult time dealing with the fallout of this, because while they have seemed to have managed to contain corona, or at least they so claim, there's still a great degree of suspicion about the origins of the virus, and a great degree of suspicion about the initial cover-up that happened. And that's not going to just disappear. You can't do something that results in the death of millions of people and trillions of dollars lost, and then expect that you can just say, let's forget about it, move on. People aren't going to let that go. There's going to be a lot of investigations, a lot of international scrutiny. So we could see more trade wars as a consequence, or even a Cold War as a consequence. So this is going to be a rocky time the next 6 months to a year, if not longer. And there's no putting this genie back in the bottle. To restart the world is going to be a difficult endeavor. And when we do that, fundamental questions are going to be asked about, well, should we keep the old order or should we change it to a new order? So I guess the point of this is to just mention to everybody, be skeptical and be cautious, and also realize that these are the moments when your freedoms either get enhanced or taken away. I remember living through September 11th. It was a horrible event. It was a terrible terrorist attack and a tragedy. But the consequence of that was my nation went to war for 19 years now. We've spent trillions of dollars. We've inadvertently and indirectly killed millions of people. And it's been a very dark time in our history. And friends have lost lives. And we have hundreds of thousands who have been impacted directly or indirectly as a consequence of 19 years of war. In fact, we've had intergenerational war, where people who fought in Afghanistan in 2002, 2003, their children are now serving in Afghanistan or Iraq, which is an extraordinary thing to have multi-generations serving in the same combat theater for the same conflict. So that was the consequence of that event. 19 years still going on. Department of Homeland Security now exists. I get molested at airports when I go through security, as many of you do as well. And that was one event, one day. Coronavirus is here, and much more significant, much bigger impact, larger death toll, huge economic impact, and totally global, felt by everybody. So the response and reaction to it is going to be larger than the response and reaction to September 11th. And if September 11th can compel my nation to go to war for 2 decades, change its social liberty structure, quadruple the size of our intelligence agencies, create completely new departments, then can you imagine what the potential global response could be to an event like this? It's something we have to be cognizant of and careful about. And again, I believe it is an opportunity, politically speaking, to propose new ideas and solutions. That's why it's imperative we get Shelley out. It's imperative we get Goguen out as quickly as we can. And it's imperative as you as a community step up, make sure your voices are heard, and use the technology I build, the technology other people build, to propose solutions to these problems as they come up. If we don't find those solutions for these problems, or we don't propose them, other people will, and those solutions will not be decentralized. They will often result in transfer of your personal liberties and power from the many to the few, and they will never give them back short of a revolution. And those don't come very often, and they're not pleasant affairs. So COVID does definitely make me sad. Everything about it makes me sad. It was a black swan event that was somehow predictable, but we treated it like a black swan. Yet it nonetheless, even though we watch it in slow motion, it's gotten to a point where it's really the real deal. My dad's a doctor. My brother's a doctor. They have COVID patients. And there's a good chance that at least my dad or my brother may catch it. And my dad's in his 60s. And so he's the exact type of demographic that has a higher CFR. Yet they still go to work every single day, and they still treat these things every single day. And it's tough. And I didn't want it to get here. No one did, but we are here. But we just can't let the fact that we're all going through a tough time justify that we have to throw away all the social progress we've made and the chances we have to be autonomous and live our lives well without fear of a giant bureaucratic government pushing 1984 on us. So let's be careful about these things. Okay. Well, anyway, that's all I have to say about the update and all I have to say about Corona. Let's see if you guys have any good there. Yeah, oh yeah, the comment right here. Johnson & Johnson has a potential vaccine. There are actually over 10 good vaccine candidates that exist. And Johnson & Johnson is doing something very good. CEO, this good guy, he announced that not only are they making a vaccine, the U.S. federal government did something very unprecedented. Basically, the U.S. government said, mass manufacture it with the assumption that it works. We'll buy all the units at cost and then go do your safety and efficacy trials. And if they succeed, we'll distribute it. If they fail, we'll just take the inventory and it's no financial risk. They don't do that for vaccine manufacturing. It's never happened before. So the first clinical trial for the Johnson & Johnson vaccine is in September. And they're going to try to fast track it so that the first doses, if it's proven safe and effective, can be delivered in Q1 of 2021 to high-risk populations. So those are people over the age of 60 or people with many comorbidities. This is a particularly appealing vaccine because the platform that Johnson & Johnson is building it on is pretty tried and true and pretty reliable. And they've developed an enormous amount of knowledge about how to rapidly do things with that platform, rapidly manufacture with that platform. So I'm very optimistic that that will have positive results and be at least somewhat effective. You have to be careful with vaccine development because you can inadvertently create a vaccine which it's like an anti-vaccine. It does the opposite of what you want. So instead of giving you immunity, it makes you more susceptible to being infected. And when you get infected, you have a worse infection. So it's pretty sad because you're taking a healthy person and you're saying if you now get coronavirus, instead of having a mild or moderate case, you'll have a moderate or severe case. So you really don't want to do that on a scale of millions of people. So it's super important that you prove it's safe. And then you have an efficacy trial of does it actually work? Does it provide you an immune response that would give you a high probability of being resistant to the disease? So this particular platform Johnson & Johnson has probably will not elicit an immune response that makes you more susceptible and probably will be effective. They've been studying coronaviruses for about 17 years, if not longer, and have developed a lot of in-house knowledge with that particular team. So I'm very optimistic about the Johnson & Johnson potential trial. Hey, Charles, do you think COVID is a chemical weapon? No, it wouldn't be chemical. It'd be a biological weapon created by the Chinese. So I have seen reports, some in China and some from Chinese universities, that the particular bat and the particular strain of corona studied did not come from a wet market, but rather was in a lab that was 3 miles away from the wet market, where they'd been studying coronavirus since the 2003 outbreak. And they had isolated this particular type of coronavirus. There was actually a paper published in February by a Chinese university that felt that the most likely causal agent of this epidemic was not just a random person buying a bat at the wet market and making bat stew and having a zoonotic transmission, but rather somebody at that lab got infected by accident, was perhaps mild or asymptomatic, and went and got lunch at the wet market and spread it that way, which would explain the aggressive cover-up, and it would explain why the first few months were a little shaky. And it would also explain or potentially why the death toll is probably a lot higher, because during that cover up, they didn't really want to admit it. The issue here is that there's just not enough evidence to know. But that particular bat is not a native to that area of China. It's about 900 miles away. So it'd be very unlikely that it'd be in a wet market natively, especially under those conditions. But it was heavily studied and collected specifically to study coronavirus. And they were studying other zoonotic transmissions like avian flu, swine flus, and these types of things. So it doesn't have any of the markers that you would expect for a normal bioweapon. The big difference between SARS CoV-1 and CoV-2, so SARS-CoV-1, which was from the 2002-2003 epidemic, is that carriers generally spread or highest infection when they were sick. So you would not be super infectious until you're actually showing symptoms. Whereas SARS-CoV-2, the one that's currently spreading, it seems that you're very infectious while you're asymptomatic or mild symptoms. So this is one of the reasons why this has become a pandemic, and the other variant of SARS did not become a pandemic because of those transmissibility differences. We're still trying to get better understanding of what is the primary mode of transmission. Is it droplets? Is it people touching surfaces? Is it just someone breathing on you? I mean, it seems to be super contagious, and there's a lot of back and forth about what's the most likely way of catching it. Will washing your hands and just wearing a mask be sufficient, or are we all just going to get it? Also, the numbers are probably not right. There's probably already been millions of people worldwide who have been infected and had mild to asymptomatic cases, and probably the death toll is 2 to 3 times higher than what's already been reported. And people just mislabeled it as death by interstitial pneumonia or something like that. So it's an interesting thing, but I don't believe it's a bioweapon. It doesn't seem to have any of the markers that an engineered virus would have. It does seem to be a natural evolution of a zoonotic transmission, but it would be unusual, the circumstances of why Wuhan, of all places, would get this. This is usually something you see from more of a rural setting that gradually works its way into a city. And the fact that there was a lab only a few miles away from the wet market that actually studied these things, and that China was able to sequence it so quickly, it's a very good possibility that that's how the transmission occurred. We probably will never know, or at least not for a while. Yeah, I see questions like this. Hey, Charles, saw a study that HIV strands are attached to coronavirus. There's no study or evidence of that. That's just made up. And it wouldn't even make sense. They're totally different molecules. Take biochemistry, people. The vaccines they developed are going to be equipped with nasty DNA harming substances, along with RFID chips for 5G tower surveillance. Again, it's just made up. I saw some people trying to say that somehow coronavirus is being spread or connected to the proliferation of 5G. There is no 5G in Iran, and they have one of the worst outbreaks. The areas of Italy that have been hit have very low penetrance of 5G, and they have one of the worst outbreaks. The same for Spain. It's going to ravage Africa and South America at some point. Very little 5G penetrance there. I live in Longmont. Very little 5G around here, and we have coronavirus cases. So this is a classic case of confirmation bias. People choose the data they like. They throw out the data that they don't like. As for nasty DNA harming substances and RFID chips, I don't understand why people are so anti-vaccine. It's a bizarre thing. Where is the global conspiracy, guys? The entire world is lying to you. I have received vaccines, dozens of them. Biothrax, yellow fever vaccine, mumps, measles, rubella, hepatitis. I'm running a company. I don't have autism. I'm feeling pretty good. Don't have cancer. So what? I got off, but no one else did. My dad's a doctor. He recommended giving it to me. He's received them himself. So somehow vaccines are bad, and we live in a world without smallpox or polio, and that killed hundreds of millions of people and devastated lives. Vaccines are not bad things. They're tools, and sometimes they're tools that aren't used correctly, and sometimes they're tools that are not designed as well as they should be, and they can cause harm. But net, they have made your lives better and my life better. As for this global conspiracy that we're just creating a pandemic for the sake of depopulating the world, it's just the same old garbage. It really is. It's conspiratorial garbage. Guys, grow up. There is no boogeyman waking up thinking about how do we go kill 5 billion people and create a new world order to destroy humanity. Turn off Alex Jones. Just stop listening to this noise and this garbage. It's not real. It's not. There are definitely conspiracies. There are definitely people who violate the public trust or form cabals to hurt us. In a lot of cases, they're public organizations like OPEC, for example. They don't need to hide. They just leverage the fact that they're powerful, leverage the fact that they control something to basically screw us. It's the same with the banking cartels. They don't need to lie. They don't need to hide themselves. We know who these banks are. They run the world. They have all the money. Then they always get bailed out first and taken care of first. And it's not really high on their agenda to go depopulate the whole world. Um, I just don't understand why people believe this stuff. And I ask, well, then provide the evidence. Where is it? Give me something that's objective and reasonable and well thought out, and that doesn't require me to believe in a gargantuan conspiracy and that my own father's lying to me and my brother's lying to me and that all the drug companies in the world are in on this and just want to harm people and hurt people. And all the scientists who work for them are evil people or misled people or silenced or something like that. You can't keep a secret in this age. If you lie, if you do something on a global scale, eventually the truth will be known. There are whistleblowers. There are people who morally disagree with you. There's something called the internet, and people can leak memos. They can leak information. Look at how difficult it's been for the Trump White House to keep any secrets inside the White House. And for some reason, people seem to think, oh, no. There's these grand, gigantic conspiracies from chemtrails to 5G. And the whole purpose of these things is to do X, Y, and Z for whoever knows why. And which people do they kill? This virus seems to discriminate and decides who to kill. With there special tags where Bob gets sick, but Alice doesn't? This was all pre-decided by a committee. Come on, grow up, people. Yeah, the CIA, of course, did sell drugs. Makes sense. When the US government started saying you have to track your books, they could no longer have a Black Ops fund. So what did they do? They created a new Black Ops fund by doing clandestine operations to capitalize themselves so they could use the proceeds to spend for their normal operations that they wanted to run off the books or through local assets. They do that stuff all the time. If the whole point of having a shadow army is using your shadow army without people know you're using it. And if you demand transparency, but at the same time you want them to be effective, then they morally compromise themselves. It's wrong, and this is why they shouldn't exist, and this is why there should be strong oversight. But the problem is that you don't reward US presidents for being meek. The US population rewards them for being strong and getting things done. And as long as your incentive scheme is built that way, yeah, they'll do that. It's not a conspiracy. It's a reality, and it's called statecraft. And it's by far not the worst thing intelligence agencies ever done. Why are we outsourcing the Hydra implementation? So we will manage the prototype building. So meaning that an IOHK product manager and lead technical architect will be behind the prototype of Hydra. And basically, we will engineer the base layer to make Hydra pluggable. So we'll know how to click it in. We'll generally understand all the problem domains and probably even have a working prototype. But it is important that we have a bit of competition because Hydra is a specification, just like Bolt spec for Lightning or like the Ledger spec we wrote for Cardano. And that means you can have competing implementations run against each other with specific capabilities and features, but they can talk to each other because it's a specification. I think it's super important that we begin diversifying our ecosystems. That means some of our commercially critical infrastructure should be built by third parties and not just Hydra, but other things, so that you guys have a menu of providers and options when Voltaire is turned on. And those providers and options, you can have debates about who would be the best party to do that. Now, obviously, we would like to stick with Hydra and keep rolling it out. But in terms of priorities, it really is not a significant one because at the end of the day, Hydra presupposes you have an enormous demand on the ledger. And frankly, smart contracts, decentralization, governance, these things are far more significant because we don't have, no cryptocurrency has enough demand to justify a protocol like Hydra. So it makes sense that given that we won't need it for 2 or 3 years, to de-risk it using a trusted third party, and allow some diversity and development ecosystem to form up, and then allow people to talk about it and the competing implementations to be built. So when we get around to actually pulling it into the system, it'll be just in time, and Cardano will fully support it. And it can't really be ported to other systems unless they make dramatic changes with the way that they operate. So this is a unique Cardano technology, and Ethereum can't use it, Tezos can't use it, Ripple can't use it. We get to use it, and it'll be there when we need it, but we don't need it today. But it's good to know that it exists, and basically it provides a beautiful future for us as we become a global scale system. So we don't have to worry about what Ethereum's worrying about, which is how do they deploy ETH2 and make all these massive dramatic changes. We don't have to go through that. We're basically good from day one. Hi, Charles. I bought my ADA in February of 2020. Well, thank you for joining. When will it be possible for me to join the testnet, or when does the testnet go to the real net? You cannot join the testnet. The snapshot was done November 29th, and we will not do another snapshot because Shelley is coming soon. We'll make an announcement soon, maybe this month or next month. It just depends on where we're at. And Aparna is the person who makes those announcements. So do watch our product crowdcasts, and we hope to have a very large audience about when Shelley is coming. But a lot of stuff is coming for Shelley very soon. And as I mentioned, there are 3 milestones. One is the Shelley Haskell testnet, and that first version is a node version for getting stake pool operators rolled over and getting their infrastructure rolled over. So what we'll do is we'll take a small clique of the largest stake pool and the most productive stake pool operators and do kind of an internal private demo for them, just so that you get a better understanding of what this is going to look like and give us some final suggestions about how we could clean up some of the integration rough points. And then we'll open it up for the public, for all stake pool operators, give them a little bit of time to get used to it and all the support that they need. And because we train that initial batch, what they can do is help the second batch. So we get additional services and additional advocates to help people make content like videos and other things on how to configure. And then once we're pretty comfortable there, the wallet backend will be fully integrated, and then we can actually launch a balance check testnet, which means we allow you to restore your mainnet wallet on the Shelley testnet with your rewards from the ITN. And you'll be able, for the first time ever, to merge those two together, and you'll see your balance plus your rewards and verify that the rewards are accurate. We'll let that percolate for just a little bit and make sure there's no issues and balances are right, because it's our only opportunity to correct it if there's an issue. And then we'll launch the Shelley mainnet, and then it'll be a stage launch, just like the Byron reboot is a stage launch. So it'll take a few weeks to fully percolate through, but we'll announce how that's all going to work. But unfortunately, you came in a little too late to participate. That said, stick around because things are moving really quickly, and be very, very ready. because it's going to be an interesting year. Hi, Charles. I was wondering if IOHK has ever considered making their own cold storage wallet product. We are going to make a hardware chip for Trusted Hardware. That's what we're doing with the University of Wyoming. But honestly, Ledger, Trezor, these other guys, they've been doing it really well, and they have great teams of people. Particularly Ledger, I really love working with them. And as a consequence, it's not a market that I really would love to get into unless we could add something very significant to it. And at the moment, we just don't have a roadmap or game plan where we could add something very significant to that market. So that's a case where I think it makes a lot more sense to partner with people, especially given that the people out there are doing a really good job. When will we stop receiving rewards from the ITN? When the ITN shuts down. So more likely than not, we'll shut the ITN down right when we launch the balance check Shelly Haskell testnet, because the time frame from the balance check Shelly Haskell testnet to the mainnet is not going to be very significant. And really the point there is to make sure that your balances are correct. So if you keep adding after we do that, it would make it a little difficult. So those will be coincided. But when that happens, it's going to take a little bit of time to let you know that. We're still digesting the Byron reboot. Do you pet your goats for stress release? Yes, I pet all my animals for stress relief. Are you a Jimmy Buffett fan? Wasting away in Margaritaville. My mother was. She grew up in Florida. Will there be more resources for developing on Plutus beyond the playground? Yes. We will make an announcement soon about a Plutus development experience, and we want to get that out as quickly as we can so people can start writing Plutus applications in anticipation of Goguen. We give people a little bit of time. Charles, you should get bees on your farm. Apiculture is what that's called. And yes, I am definitely planning on doing that along with aquaculture. In fact, I have a hydroponics book somewhere around here. I'll show you guys later. I took it in the other room. Tears for Fears or Massive Attack? Massive Attack, come on, teardrop. How easy is it going to be to stake ADA? As easy as it is on the incentivized testnet. If you've used that, then you can definitely get a sense of the experience. Do you sanitize your animals before letting others pet them? No. They're animals. They're farm animals. We farmers have had to deal with a lot of diseases normal people don't. For example, anthrax used to be called wool sorters disease because it actually was most commonly transmitted from the wool of sheep. So think about that. Charles, can we get more Tamara on camera? We always try to get her to do more camera work. She's doing a phenomenal job at the Cardano Foundation and also as my chief of staff at IOHK. And as her roles and responsibilities tend to increase, I think you'll probably see a lot more of her. But she's a great communicator and also tremendously talented at solving complicated problems. Generally, where she tends to work best is when there's some, terribly fallen apart product or project, and we send her in to kind of put all the pieces back together and figure out how to get it unstuck and get the right resources assigned and the right strategy behind it. And that's really an art. There's not many people I've worked with who do that as well as she's done it. And I really do enjoy working with her on those things. And the lady from the update you're talking about is Aparna Jew. And Aparna is the senior product manager for Cardano. And she's really done a phenomenal job in the last 4 months. getting our product design philosophy unified and getting all the product managers to work as one team. It's very hard to do that, and she found a way to do that. And I love working with her as well. I have a lot of respect for Aparna. Charles, I'm getting a painting made for you by a Boulder, Colorado artist. Well, thank you. Thank you, Brett. When this quarantine ends, they can put it in the office. Do you have any alpacas on the ranch? Alpacas are coming this year. Favorite Simpsons episode? that's that's an interesting one. I'll have to give that a thought. There was the golden era when Conan O'Brien wrote for The Simpsons. I think that was like seasons 3 or 4, all the way up to season 9, and there were just so many amazing episodes in that time period. Simpsons now is just terrible. Are you getting a PS5 or an Xbox X? I'm an Xbox fan, and I think Microsoft has perfected the Xbox. It's really crazy. Did you get Mad Cow down there 20 years ago? Well, if I had it, I'd look like I had Alzheimer's. Prions are terrible things. Spongiform encephalopathy. Yeah, it's really nasty stuff. There's even a prion you can get from humans. It's called Kuru syndrome. The 4 people in Papua New Guinea get it because they're cannibals. South Park, yes. South Park, just when you think they're out, like they went all crazy with Mr. Garrison being Trump and the member berries and so forth. Like, show's starting to die. Then they come back and they have like Randy killing Winnie the Pooh. And I'm just thinking to myself, oh my God, South Park is back. Those guys are pretty crazy. I have a lot of respect for their creativity. They find a way to be vulgar yet elegant. And I've just never witnessed a show that can do that. Ever do any drip irrigation for some gardening on your farm? Yeah, I do grow hay, and I'll probably grow some alfalfa. And I'm actually doing a rather substantial irrigation upgrade, and I'm getting some sprinklers put in. I'll take some pictures once I have it. Kind of roll around. They're pretty cool things. They're not super expensive, but they certainly aren't cheap. And hopefully, I can continue getting 2 to 3 cuts of hay per year. Did Carol Baskin feed her husband to tigers or not? I don't know. Somebody was talking to me today about this. There's some reality thing or a documentary where there's some tiger guy, Joe Exotic, I think it is, and there's like his extended network of exotic animal dealers, and everybody's white trash or something. I don't know. I haven't watched it. I'm not familiar with the story. I'm not gonna arbitrarily speculate on whether someone fed their husband to tigers or not. I do know of a case where someone was fed to tigers, but that happened in the Philippines about 10 years ago. And those were bad people. So I don't speculate on these things. Crow corn for chickens. No, no corn. Are you a rancher or farmer? At the moment, a farmer. All the animals I have, I don't eat or sell for people to eat, and we don't produce agricultural products from them. Farmer, I have hay, And for the past 2 years, my family's been involved, though, in farming and ranching for over 70 years, off and on. My grandfather grew up in Big Timber, Montana, and Great Falls. And he had a large ranch in Miles City and then moved back to Big Timber. And he was a doctor and a farmer and a rancher, everything from cattle to sheep. And my dad lives up in Wyoming. And so he's a doctor, but he's starting to collect some animals. Most recently, he's gotten an antelope. There's a long story behind that one, but it runs in our blood. We have farmers and ranchers in the family, and there was no way I could get away with not doing that, at least part time. And I love it. It's a lot of fun. It's a good way to relieve stress. Charles, do you watch Westworld? Yes, but I have not seen any of season 3. I'm holding off until the whole season is done, and then I'll binge watch it on the plane. Charles, if Vitalik and Dan Larimer were both hanging off a cliff and you could save only one of them, who would you save? Vitalik. Who is your favorite mathematician? That's a hard one. I really like David Hilbert, although Emil Artin is also an amazing mathematician. And Grothendieck. I'll give you one of them. Any solar? Yes, putting in solar this year. Are you still going to base jump wingsuit the Grand Tetons? That was never planned. Come on, you. I read an article about Charles today a year ago from Coin Jazeera. Lelo, wow. Yeah, that's a parody site, guys. It's like The Onion. It's a parody. It's not real life. Don't believe everything you read on the internet, especially things that are meant to be parodies. What's the best muscle car? Mustangs. Those are great muscle cars. Although, there are some good muscle cars from Dodge as well. Was that Charger? I'm an Italian car guy for sports cars. Charles, what's behind the door is behind you. It's just like the cube. You'll never know. Just white light. Yeah, Bill Withers died. I heard about that. Ain't no sunshine where she's gone. Wonderful artist, and I'm real sad. He was 81 years old. The Camaro, that's it. The Chevy Camaro. Yeah, Camaro's a good car. Lambo tractor or John Deere? I own a John Deere. 1980s John Deere. Charles, you making it to Los Angeles this year? Will there be a Los Angeles left? Mustangs suck. I don't know. Come on, guys. The Shelby, 600 horsepower, 60K. It's not bad. Favorite whiskey? Hibiki. Are you taking vitamin C to strengthen your immune system? Yes. That's a fun question. Charles, can you please elaborate on the Daedalus wallet? Why does it take 24 hours to download? So that's actually a very good question to ask. So you may have seen syncing times ranging from about an hour all the way up to about 9 hours, 10 hours for the new Daedalus flight. So 3 things. One, most people recognize flight is considerably faster than the original Daedalus. 2, most people who download use flight are capable of using flight are having a better overall experience than other users. And 3, it's important to understand that the syncing of the blockchain is not just a network process. Okay, it's not just about retrieving a block. When you get a block, you have to do something with a block. So there's a CPU, memory, and disk operation in addition to a network operation. So all 4 of these factors weigh into how long it takes to sync. So you can have a gigabit fiber optic low latency synchronous line, gigabit up, gigabit down, the fastest you can buy. And you can connect that to a really shitty old laptop and you're going to see a very long sync time because while the blocks can come to you, you can't process them as fast as you need to. You can have a very powerful computer like a Core i9 with 64 gigabytes of RAM and an NVMe solid state hard drive and just be running as fast as possible. And you could be on a DSL 1.5 megabit a second internet connection. Okay, so you're not going to really get the blockchain fast. And there's a whole spectrum of configuration that exists in. Then you can further subdivide it into Windows, Linux, and Mac. Most of our developers come from the open source community and are Haskell guys, which means they live in the Linux and the Mac world, which means that on Windows, it tends to be their secondary development platform. I have made a lot of effort in the last 6 months to try to force them to be more Windows-centric. Unfortunately, Haskell does have some issues with Windows. And actually, over 2 years, we've spent trying to improve that. And we've made contributions directly to Haskell, from GHC to other things, to try to improve it to a point where we can deploy Windows applications comfortably with the same quality and performance window as we do with Linux and Mac. So anyway, it's a struggle. But that has been mostly ameliorated. Now, if you are experiencing very long sync times, it's going to most likely be any one of those 4 factors or a combination of them: the CPU, the memory, the disk, and your network. For example, you have a very powerful CPU, lots of memory, but if you have an old, crappy magnetic hard drive that's quite slow, yeah, you're going to have a little bit of a slow syncing time there. And your network can also have a lot to do with it. Now, we have found some avenues to increase syncing time, to decrease syncing time, to increase performance and optimize, especially on Windows, because we notice that Linux is really fast because that's what we've tested the most on, because that's what we developed natively on. But it's still a process, and over time, things will get faster. But it is gigabytes of data and gigabytes of structured data that needs to be validated. So even if you get it quickly, it does take a little bit of time to process it. And syncing times from 0 to finished under an hour are probably a good target. But getting it to like 10 minutes or 5 minutes is just not feasible because you're downloading gigabytes of validatable data. But it only has to be done once, and then you can use the product afterwards. But that's the point of a full node. And if you don't want that user experience, and you don't want to run a full node, then download Yoroi, which is a light client. You can use it almost immediately. And Yoroi does have staking. No, Daedalus is not data intensive for space. You only need a few gigabytes of storage. So any normal laptop or computer can service the full node. In fact, you can even run Daedalus a full node on a Raspberry Pi. And people have done that. How many milligrams of vitamin C do you take? 1,000. When Koenigsegg. Sorry, no, I'm a Lamborghini fan, not a Koenigsegg fan. When's your next blog post on Thoughts from Charles? Good to see you, Justin Fujimoto. I don't know. I was going to do something on International Women's Day, but I didn't get around to it. Does IOHK leverage property-based testing or directed fuzzing in the development and validation process? Yes, we extensively use QuickCheck. In fact, we've written blog posts about how we use QuickCheck, and we're actually writing one right now about some exotic bugs we found on the consensus side. Fuzzing, not as much. Once COVID is all dead, please come to the racetrack to Las Vegas to drive the Lamborghini Performante or the Aventador S. Well, guys, I have a Huracan. Why would I want to go to a track to drive another Lamborghini when I can just go over there? Will updates to the Haskell testnet take long periods of time once it's out? No. The Rust testnet was updated weekly, and the Haskell testnet will be updated with a similar cadence. Hey, Charles, Joe Biden or Bernie Sanders? Dementia or communism? Neither. Neither. Why Lamborghini fan? Because they're amazing cars that are well built and sound incredible and are fun to drive. That's why people say win Lambo. Is your Wim Hof trip still on? No, it had to be canceled. I can't go anywhere. Can't even fly to Japan right now. Travel's been banned. So next year, will there be an NFL season this year? Couldn't care less. Heard Tom Brady left the Patriots, playing for Tampa Bay. Just don't care. They burned their bridges with me. I don't like the NFL anymore. Used to love it. Watched it every weekend with my dad. It's a great experience. But now, who cares? Have I ever read Thomas Sowell? Yes. Do I watch the NBA? Yeah, I was a huge Denver Nuggets fan when George Karl was there. What about a McLaren? Can you please say something about the status of the project in Ethiopia? Last update I got, and we're just going through the feasibility study right now. Unfortunately, Ethiopia, like every other country, is right now suffering from coronavirus experience, and they're doing things like suspending their elections, and infrastructure is being shut down. So it's the last thing on anybody's mind about running pilots. The challenge is that a lot of the pilots that we were doing involved things that had high population density and people doing things in close quarters together. So that's not going to work so well right now. So we're still going through the feasibility. I should get that report sometime this month. I'll talk to John O'Connor about it. Bruce Willis or Arnold Schwarzenegger? Schwarzenegger. He has a mini donkey, just like me. Come on now. Although Willis did do Demi Moore. Have you been to the Ivory Coast? Yes. I've even been to Sierra Leone. Come for the war and chaos, stay for the Ebola. Good old Freetown. Rob Cohen seems very bright. He's very, very bright. Brilliant kid. Very humble, too. McLarens are the worst cars ever built. Yeah, that's why I have a Lambo. Tesla truck. I heard they redesigned the Cybertruck. So it's no longer Mad Max. It looks more conventional. Would Cardano launch Voltaire this year? Yes. I do not speak Japanese. Yeah, I heard that Binance just bought CoinMarketCap. That's pretty cool. Here for giraffe. Yeah, I actually do own a giraffe. It's in South Africa. It was a gift from the president of South Africa. How's the treasury system going? Quite well. Charles, can you help me educate my neighborhood on Cardano? Do you have any PowerPoints? We will have handouts and materials come June. So those are on the way. The foundation's doing a good job with that. In fact, that's something McCann is directly participating on. Cybertruck redesign was an April Fool's joke. I hope so. I really do. I just saw it and I was hoping it was a joke or something. And by the way, you don't refer to Chico as Chico. It's Molten Tar Monster number 3. You have to get the right. I'll respond to that, but not to Chico. Any update on the Jinja hippos? Yeah, we're waiting on that. That's another thing that got shut down. I was actually planning on going and finalizing the acquisition when I went to Uganda for the Africa trip, which was scheduled for March. And I didn't go to Africa in March. I was going to go to South Africa, Uganda, Rwanda, Tanzania, Ethiopia, and if we had time, Kenya. And it didn't happen, thanks to Corona. Best steak place in Japan. There's a really good place in Namba in Osaka that I just love, absolutely love. And Tokyo's got a lot of good steakhouses as well. In fact, there's a steakhouse in Tokyo where the manager is a fan of Cardano, and we even had for the 1 year anniversary our after party there. It was at the Ruth Chris Steakhouse. He was such a nice guy. Can you talk more on Ergo? Ergo is a project that Alex Cherpanoy created on the back end of Scorex. And he's put all of his cool ideas into it, like non-outsourceable puzzles and Sigma protocols. And it's a great product. And I really, really like Ergo. And I think it's pretty cool. Charles, have you multiplied your chickens or are you still with 10? I am still with 10. And they keep trying to get themselves killed because they're chickens and they're very good at trying to get themselves killed. Do you like Yamazaki? Yamazaki is good whiskey. Hibiki is my favorite, but Yamazaki is quite good too. Harmony. Are you or whoever's going to write a smart contract on your Twitter for that $50 bet? Yeah, that bet was great. I saw somebody suggest that I should collect the money because Shelly's obviously shipping, guys, very soon. It's not that far out. It's like the ITN is a great example of how close we are to it. The Byron reboots the foundation it's being built on, and that's the 80% of the code base. And every 2 weeks we update towards Shelly. So it's like, come on, guys, it's coming out. I understand there were delays, but it's not that far out. So he's going to owe me $50, and I just really would love to collect that with a smart contract on Cardano as just to prove a point. But of course, he won't pay me because Twitter people don't. I still don't understand why you can't get a fixed date. Just because of how things have been put together. The reality is we built a lot of things as pieces, and the pieces have to be integrated together. And those integrations, if they go really well, go very quickly. And if they don't go well, then they end up getting mired in debugging and cleaning and performance profiling and patching memory leaks. And that could end up becoming weeks. There's also potential flaws that get uncovered along the way, or emergent issues that get uncovered. So it's sometimes very difficult to predict how long integrations take and how long pieces take, although we do actually have internal roadmaps. And this year we've been tracking them with a great degree of accuracy. We anticipated the Byron reboot coming out sometime in March, the second half of March, and it hit end of March. So we were pretty on with that. And we actually have a good date range for Shelley, but I'm not going to announce anything or allow anything to be announced until we have the Haskell Shelley testnet, at least for the node guys, for the stake pools out. Because at that point, then what we see in reality is matching what we thought internally. And so then we can have a lot of confidence in these dates. I would have been a little looser had we not had our track record of dates slipping. And now we want to be really careful about these things. But overall, our backlog is known, the work units are known. Yeah, but things come up too, like coronavirus is starting to spread. One of our employees already has it, a non-critical one in terms of development, but still it's an example of how things could get slowed down potentially. Now, there are no indications of that. In fact, it's the opposite. We're seeing things speeding up, but in an abundance of caution, until we have absolute certainty that date is not going to slip, we're not going to announce anything. And I think that's reasonable. Tupac or Biggie? Tupac. Why is your Pink Floyd picture relegated to the floor? Because I haven't bothered to move it to the office. I have the Waterhouse painting there. That's the Gustav Klimt. I don't have any room in the office to put the Pink Floyd painting anymore. If you saw Chico on the streets, would there be real beef? Punch of Throne. Why? Molten Tar Monster #3. He's nothing. He's nothing. He's a nobody. He's the guy that'll eventually be schizophrenic, masturbating next to a taco stand in his 40s and arrested so that he doesn't have to spend a night in the streets, and he gets a warm place to sleep and some health care. He's a nobody. They have their moments, their time, and their following, and his people don't love him. Guys, not in my league. Earth, Wind & Fire. Yes, very good disco band. A lot of fun with them. Although I was a Bee Gees fan more than Earth, Wind & Fire. Why is the daily volume of Cardano significantly lower than the competing blockchains such as EOS? I think a lot of our volume is real volume because it's traded on real exchanges. I'm a bit skeptical about these chains that have 500 million or $1 billion of turnover. Because when I talk to professional traders, I don't really see that kind of turnover. Realistically speaking, 50 to 100 million is reasonable. for a market cap 1 billion coin historically. But then somewhere along the way, the trading volumes got very inflated and we saw a high degree of turnover. Now, there are some exceptions, like Tether does make sense because it's the entry and exit point for fiat-free exchanges. But I think our volume is reasonable for the exchanges we are on. When we get on larger exchanges, like the exchange that shall not be named, which will come at some point, I think we will see probably a 2 to 3x increase in volume, and that'll just come organically and naturally. But I'm pretty comfortable with the volume that's there, and the order book is pretty reasonable given our market capitalization. We actually just hired a quantitative analyst at IOHK, financial mathematician, and we are starting to model these things. We hired him to work on the stablecoin project that we're looking at, but we also tend to look at market structure and stability, both on the micro and macro sense, and also try to predict how events are going to impact the market for portfolio optimization. How many acres is your ranch? 50. Not too big, not too small, just the right size. Good to go coyote hunting. Charles, I see you guys are doing a lot of hiring. We are. Everybody else is firing people. We're hiring people. Must be a sign. Charles, please, when staking on Ledger, cold staking is what is that called? Cold staking will be in the Shelley timeframe. So if not immediately, when Shelley launches, shortly thereafter. I think the Ledger integration contract is about 12 weeks. So it takes at least 3 months for that to get done. And we started in March. So it'll happen soon. Why was Ethereum named Ethereum? Because of World of Warcraft. No joke. It was something from Vitalik. Something in the game. Do you enjoy fishing? Yes, I used to love deep sea fishing. Catching a swordfish is a lot of fun. Although catfish are my favorite fish to catch. I love fishing. Haven't had a chance to do it recently. One of these days, I gotta get a lake or a pond or something. Damn EPA. Damn Boulder County. Bum, bum. What's the percentage of ROI for cold staking? The cold staking revenue will be the exact same as regular staking. It's just a different mechanism to do that. Engineer Prepper, have you ever eaten lionfish? Hi, Charles. Thanks for having me. Can you please discuss the issues surrounding the massive stake pools, developing an alliance, potentially reducing the decentralization potential for the nation, for the network? Guys, I saw that story which said that coalition is like forming to exclude people. First off, it was hype and a very unfortunate article. You have to own a lot of ADA to control the network. We designed the system that way with the K parameter. So if a cartel of large holders get together, they certainly can do stuff, but they can't censor the system. They can just merely slow things down if desired. There are no coalitions at the moment that are disrupting the operations of the ITN. That's just anybody who's saying otherwise is not being intellectually honest. In fact, it's very positive to see what type of social structures people form. And then, of course, we can build mitigations where and when they make sense. But at the moment, we're not being attacked by a cartel or anything like that. I don't understand why that article was written. It was quite unfortunate. What would happen if I stopped by to say hello? I'd shoot you. No one comes to my house. Catch tuna off the coast of Maine. Yeah, there's not much tuna left. It's going extinct. Charles, why is there cryptos with small circulating supplies and others so big? What is better and why? It's called a decimal point. Doesn't really matter. So large supply, small supply, just where you put the decimal point. It actually has no bearing on anything. Why did Bernardo David left? Bernardo David graduated. In terms of proof of stake, he was the sharpest. There's some bright people at IOHK. He graduated, he got his PhD, and then he got a professorship. So what happened was Bernardo worked for us as a graduate student. Then he got a postdoc at our lab at Tokyo Institute of Technology. And then after he finished his postdoc, he actually got a tenure track professorship position, I believe, at the University of Copenhagen. And this is what happens when you're in the academic world, especially when you hire academic employees. Unless they're an industrial researcher and they work for you full time, if they want to stay in academia, eventually they take a professorship if they can get one. And he did. And he's doing some good work over there, and he's writing great papers. I really enjoyed working with Bernardo. I thought he was a great kid. And it was so satisfying to watch him grow from a graduate student to a postdoc to actually go tenure track. It makes me feel a little old. The white is coming in the beard and everything to watch the kids grow up. But for his time here at IOHK, he did some great things like the original Ouroboros protocol, the Kaleidoscope and Royale protocols. And we did a lot of good MPC research. We replaced him with a researcher named Sandro, and he's also an MPC expert. And Sandro's been doing some phenomenal work as well for us. And right now working on stuff like Hydra and spikes. But eventually we'll get back to the MPC stuff. And Bincheng Zhang is also our other MPC guy. Roger Ver or Craig Wright? Roger Ver. Roger's a friend. I love Roger. Craig is a monster. I don't like him at all. And he doesn't like me, but he doesn't like anybody. Shotgun, rifle, or handgun? Handgun. Charles, will any STOs be issued on Cardano? Actually, there are some that are already proposing. When we have our multi-asset standard, I believe that Cardano will be the best product in the world for issuing security tokens. We'll have an identity standard. We'll have DSLs that allow you to very clearly model how your assets are going to move. It will be the best platform to issue currencies on, tokens on. And we can, of course, write a legal DSL if there's an appetite for it. But I do feel that Cardano is uniquely suited from a performance perspective, a regulatory perspective, to be the preferred platform for security tokens above and beyond anything I see with Polymesh or Polymath or any other security token platform. We built Cardano specifically to be useful for both regulated and unregulated products. And there's a lot of thought that went into the things that you need to build a stable and credible platform that people would like. And we've actually had discussions with developing countries about giving them stock markets and giving them a way of creating IPOs for SMEs via an STO. So I really firmly believe Cardano is going to be a great platform for that. It's going to drive a lot of adoption and value for Cardano. If I start translating your material and promoting IOHK in Portugal, would that constitute a problem? I don't see why not. Go be surrogate. Become a Cardano ambassador. More the merrier. We'd love to have you. And Portuguese is a great language. Obrigado. Why is Tone Vase a negative Nancy? I know Tone very well. He's a good guy. We talk all the time, usually events, not as much lately because we're both locked down. But he's always been very friendly in person to me. He just has a way about him that makes him a unique guy, and that's his brand. And he makes money off of that, and that's okay. But we do get along. You can disagree with people without being disagreeable. And Tone and I have that kind of relationship. We disagree, but we're not disagreeable. 9mm or 45 ACP. I have both, FN Tactical, FN 45. Hi, Charles. Do you drink coffee? Ton of coffee every day, all day long. Mathematician. Mathematicians turn coffee into proofs. That's what Paul Erdős said. You like your Walther more than a Glock? I have a Glock 23 as well. That's a good gun. Glock 17 is nice too, especially when you put a red dot sight on it. Is there any chance that Cardano could be used as a voting system? Yes, Cardano can definitely be used as a voting system. In fact, when Voltaire comes, it's going to be the best you've ever seen. Amazingly great, insanely great. And anybody who tells you otherwise, fake news. Can coffee cause high blood pressure? Probably, but that's a temporary thing, right? And then after the caffeine goes down, it goes down. Who cares? People get so worried about these things. Oh, God, you can't have the coffee. Oh, no, it'll kill you. Ah. Bulletproof coffee for the win. Yeah, homemade. You take Kerrygold unsalted butter, cut it. You put some MCT oil with it. Put those two things together with the coffee in a blender. Blend it for 50 seconds and pour it in. You get your bulletproof coffee. It's right there. It's amazing. Love your heart cares in 20 years. If you have chronic high blood pressure, of course it cares. We have spikes of blood pressure. That's natural. Come on. And it doesn't necessarily cause atherosclerosis. Well, Golden Eagle, you know damn well if you're in med school that people have all kinds of spikes in vitals, from blood pressure to heart rate to other such things, even body temperature, just depending on what's going on, diet, environment, et cetera, et cetera. And I think people focus too much on things like, is coffee or salt or other things good or bad, when much more foundational things, for example, exercise, could make dramatic differences in people's long-term health. Is Vitalik going to beg for you back? No. We're doing our own things. That marriage will never be, we're never going back. It's like when McCartney and John Lennon split up. Never getting back together, ever. Ever, ever, ever. Are there any delays? No delays. We're actually doing well. Life is good. Charles, can you get Andreas Antonopoulos to promote Cardano? I grew up with Andreas Antonopoulos, the Bitcoin Education Project and all these other things. He's a good guy, and he's a very passionate guy, and he's a very principled guy. I would like the next Andreas Antonopoulos to promote Cardano. Not Andreas, but the next one, the guy you don't know yet, and that can be you. It can be anybody. The point here isn't about bringing famous, well-known people and convincing them to come into our system. The point here is to create new famous, well-known people. Just like Bitcoin created me and Andreas, I'd like to see the next generation come out of our stuff. Yeah, that's true exercise. I was going to say you responded, LOL, have a good night. Must go study now. Got a final. Gold Eagle, where are you at in your medical school curriculum? Are you at allopath or osteopathic education? Or are you in your clinical years, or are you in your basic science 2 years? Like, have you taken the USMLE yet? Charles, should I still bread if it is to feed my family? No, Javert, never. I will hunt you for 20 years. What's Cardano's greatest feature over Ethereum long term? The extended UTXO model in Plutus, bar none. Significantly better smart contract model. It's going to make these guys look like a pile of shit. So I would highly recommend when we create the content on that to really look into it. It's a big deal. Extended UTXO, much, much better way of doing smart contracts. Does the institution hinder free thinking? Always. And that's the point. Green New Deal? No way. All we'd have to do to solve this whole damn global warming crisis, guy, we have carbon air capture, and we have the capacity at a very low cost to gradually move our entire backbone to nuclear and alternative energy. So if you just put heavy subsidies, and they don't even have to be big, like 25 to 50 billion per year, into energy storage, we do a one-time rebuilding of our transmission, and they also do a broadband, so a broadband over power line play with it, so we can get a much better transmission medium, so we can move power around much more efficiently. And we put large subsidies into wind and solar, and then we build a nuclear backbone with fourth generation nuclear power. Within 25 years, 100% of all energy generated in the United States, and frankly, you can just replicate this in any nation, would be alternative energy or non-carbon producing. And then a carbon air capture, you just create quotas for it. And over time, that technology gets really good. You can take carbon right out of the air. You can sequester it or turn it into biofuels or oil, whatever the hell you want to do, or plastics. You can do whatever you want to do with it, okay? But you can suck carbon out, so you can gradually reduce the carbon. And then for the energy of transportation, get graphene batteries out. They're here. I have one. So within 10 to 20 years, graphene will be viable for battery technology. And then it's game over for ICE, because you have batteries that go 1,200, 1,300 miles without it charging. And they charge really quickly. They charge in 2 or 3 hours. So why would you want a car that only goes 300 miles and it's much more expensive to fill? So it's simple to solve this problem if you have the right incentives, the right thought process, and the right people behind it. In terms of energy storage for large grid scale, I really like gravity storage. They have this company called Gravicity, where they drill these mine shafts, and they basically put these big weights and you pull them up and they store energy. So, and then when they fall, they generate energy. And so super simple systems. You don't have to overthink these things. But solar and wind are definitely where they need to be. Manufacturing costs are definitely where they need to be. And fourth generation nuclear power is definitely where it needs to be, especially since you can recycle the fuel and process it so you don't have nuclear waste without proliferation concerns. So the people who write these things like the Green New Deal, they're communists. And what they want to do is basically turn the entire country into a communist country. Don't listen to them. They're very bad people. Any geothermal for your house's HVAC? Putting it in. Geothermal is great. Fusion or fission? I like laser fusion, but we're not there yet. NIF is cool. Fission is where it's at. Traveling wave reactors, pebble bed reactors, thorium reactors are all very reliable and very good. Geothermal is dangerous. No, it isn't. They have something called a geothermal gradient. You can use it for HVAC. You don't have to harvest anything. You just dig below frost line. Come on, guys. Don't comment on things you don't understand. How do you feel about Philippe saying he wasn't impressed behind the scenes of the ITN? Well, he was quoted out of context, and this is just a great example of what happens when molten tar monsters manipulate and use selection bias to do things. Both Philip and Rick are big advocates of the ITN, participate in the ITN, and have said that they've seen enormous progress and they've really appreciated what they've seen from both the community and from IOHK over the last 3 months. It had a rocky, rough start, and in just 3 months' time, we built basically a full cryptocurrency that people really love using, and there's a great community behind it. So, no, that's not his opinion. And anybody who says it is just taking one quote out of context for the purpose of maligning the project. And this is just what people do. They just want one little clip of something said. A great example would be a video I made in Greece at the Bitcoin Summer School back in 2016. So at that time, Emurgo still had a commercial focus where they were probably going to go to market with games. So I said in a 2-minute video that Cardano has games, or it's going to have games, because that was the original commercial focus. So this group of people running around saying Cardano is a gambling platform. That's how we sold it. That's its only purpose. And, that's the only thing we were thinking about. Took a 2-minute clip where for 5 seconds of that 2-minute clip, I mentioned that because one of our commercial partners was going to go do that. Now, I said that at an academic conference where we were talking about proof of stake and talking about peer-reviewed white papers. It's just like people love taking one thing out of context. It's a favorite political thing. But anyway, it is what it is. Socialists not going, oh, no. AOC is a communist and Bernie's a communist. They love it. They want all the factors of production to be controlled by the government. And if they were given the power, there would be gulags. Make no mistake. You can put rose-colored glasses on anytime you want, but they say everything should be free. Education, healthcare. Oh, well, if the industry don't want to cooperate, take them over, nationalize them. Nationalize this, nationalize that. Social justice, identity justice. I don't want to hear it. It's malarkey. Just malarkey. Charles, how do you feel about the government going after Maduro and offering 15 million from him? Yeah, it's called Noriega. We've been through this before. Venezuela has been a geopolitical foe of the United States for a long time, since Hugo Chavez. He nationalized industries, That was a great idea, wasn't it? Destroyed their entire economy, alienated their nation from the world community. And basically, there's now a narco government where this guy is keeping in power in part by doing illicit activities, and like most of these corrupt bastards in South America do. It's a bad situation all around. And as always, America can't resist but get itself involved in bad situations. So I wouldn't be surprised to see if regime change happens in the 3 to 5 year time horizon, if not shorter. In fact, these recent activities in the Caribbean and in Central America are directly connected to the Maduro regime, and they may actually result in further sanctions. And there's not only a $15 million reward, there's actually a hit out on them. So I wouldn't be surprised to see Maduro go away soon and be replaced. That's just the way it is. And no, I'm not for Biden. The guy's got dementia, guys. He has dementia. There's no doubt in my mind about it. He's fading. Can Cardano become faster in the future? Yes, it's as fast as it needs to be. Should we start building thorium reactors? Yes. I never understood, with the whole Democratic primaries, why didn't they nominate Tulsi Gabbard? I just never understood that. Someone like her, she checked every box and would probably win the election hands down very easily. Instead, they said she was an asset of Assad. Okay, a war veteran who fought in Iraq is working for a foreign government, and a Russian, and all of her support came from Russian trolls. This is the sadness of the left. They seem to eat each other and cannibalize each other, and they claim they believe in things and they aspire to things, and then they regress back to these just pettiness. And it lacks any semblance of productivity or progress. And it's just curious to me. That whole process is curious to me. And at the end of the day, they picked the worst possible candidate they could have picked, Biden, who maybe 10 years ago was viable, but is not viable today. Be the oldest person ever nominated on the left. And coming into office, he's not prepared for it anymore. So he's going to be a puppet for basically whichever interests represent the party. And they didn't have to do that. It was not something that was on the table, but they decided to do it nonetheless. Don't know why, but they did it that way. It's just craziness. Absolute craziness. And the alternative is a 78-year-old communist. Ugh, it's a mess. These have consequences, these decisions, and they just don't seem to care. Well, Brad, my grandfather died of Alzheimer's. My grandmother died of dementia. My other grandmother, who just died, had Lewy body disease. I'm a bit of an expert on dementia as well. And I've watched them fade. And Biden is exhibiting the exact same patterns that my grandfather did when he had the early stages of Alzheimer's. The way he communicates, the confusion, especially during certain time periods, it's exactly moment by moment what my grandfather's gone through. Takes years for these things to fully materialize, and there's ways you can hide it, but it's very clear seeing Biden from when he was vice president to when he was a senator running in 2008 to today. He's a different person today than he was 12 years ago. I guarantee there's something not right there. They can't have the guy speak for more than 5-10 minutes. This is a guy that used to be able to speak for 3.5 hours straight, and a long train of thought without making a gaffe. And now he can't speak for 5 or 10 minutes. There's something seriously wrong there. Yeah, it is horrible to watch. UBI is an interesting concept. Yang Gang keeps pushing it. Norway is a country where UBI would work. Why? Because Norway made good decisions. What they did is they proactively saved and set aside trillions of dollars of money and put themselves in a position where the nation has surplus wealth that is just sitting there. And I think it's something like $100,000 or $200,000 per citizen. I'd have to look it up, but it's quite a substantial amount of money. So you could look at UBI in a Norwegian sense and say, we're going to do a dividend or a distribution from wealth of society to our people as a reward for good fiscal policy. So it creates an incentive for the government not to have debt and to have sound money and to behave well. When UBI is done, when you're massively in debt, then the only way you pay for UBI is either redistribution, and that never works because the rich people are super good at hiding their money or leaving, or you pay through UBI through inflation. So if you're printing the money to give the money to them, then while they get more nominal money in their bank account, the real value is not there because their purchasing power goes down, and the rich people benefit from it. They always can deal with inflation before the poor people can, and the poor people pay it back in higher gas, rent, and food cost. So yes, you've given them something, but there's no net value to the thing that you've given them. You've actually debased the currency. So I sincerely doubt that UBI could be effective in the United States the way it could be effective in a country like Norway if you're redistributing an existing pool of capital without debasing the currency. I think it's probably much more prudent to do staged intervention. In particular, getting infrastructure where it needs to go, and then getting people into vocational training in particular is very powerful for climbing wealth. Not college, but vocational training. College is worthless in terms of increasing people's earnings. Even if they graduate, and graduation rates aren't what they need to be, there's a less and less statistical significance in the amount of earnings from a person graduating than there used to be 10 or 15 years ago relative to the costs of getting them through the program. And it's not viable to say that we'll just nationalize the cost because that $250,000 still has to be paid from somewhere. And again, what these people do is they just say, well, redistribution. And again, that doesn't work. So it's going to be inflation that ends up paying for it, debt that ends up paying for it. And then you're just kicking that cost down the road. And the poor people almost always get hurt first. They're the first to be laid off. They're the ones who feel inflation the hardest. And they're the ones most sensitive to wage changes, whereas the wealthy have ways of hedging. So I don't think UBI works in this particular sense. UBI paid by value added tax has minimal effect on inflation. Yeah, that's a good point. There are ways of implementing UBI which wouldn't potentially have a huge issue. But you have to be careful about things like sales taxes because again, those hurt the poor much more than they hurt the wealthy. I'm not 34, I'm 32. Well, capitalism is not necessarily incompatible with UBI. That's another misconception. So UBI is saying we're going to give a distribution to the entire population. And then you could look at it from a perspective of, well, you guys are shareholders in the public trust. So imagine if America was a corporation, we own shares in it, we do a distribution, get a dividend. Okay, so if America is doing well and we have great fiscal policy, monetary policy, and we take in more than we spend, then you could redistribute that and through a dividend, right? If you have some surplus resources. This is why I bring up the Norwegian model, because it's exactly what they did. They set aside something, they grew a huge sovereign wealth fund, and now they have all this money. And they could conceivably start paying that money to their citizens as a dividend. So that's not incompatible with capitalism. That's just compatible with good fiscal and monetary policy. Where it becomes problematic for capitalism is when you have to nationalize the factors of production or interfere with the markets to do a distribution like that, in which case you're no longer in a free market society. We had a surplus back in 2000. It's gone. And it's sad. Our national debt was $4.5 trillion. All how things have changed in just 20 years. Yeah, you don't want Bloomberg. Bloomberg is a really nasty man. He's just as bad as Trump. Do you believe there is a deep state? Yes, there is a deep state. It's called the bureaucracy. It's much more powerful than the politicians. And yeah, politicians definitely are robbing you. The system is robbing you. All right, we're up at 2 hours. It's 1 o'clock in the morning. I think I'll cut it here, guys. Is your Chinese animal the year of the dragon or the rabbit? It's the rabbit. I'm a rabbit. 1987. Well, this has been a lot of fun. We laughed, we cried. A proper AMA, good moderation. Thank you so much, moderators. And thank you guys for all your great questions. 30-minute briefing in the beginning. And as always, the heart and soul of Cardano always is our community. So you guys are wonderful. And I'll see you again tomorrow or some other day. Good night.